Claudia Regal. I work for the city of New Orleans. We're actually a city department. We do lots of different things, so I'm going to set you up, for what we do. We actually fall under Homeland Security, which is pretty interesting for a mosquito control abatement district, but that's what we do. We do all of the mosquito abatement for Orleans Parish. How many have been to New Orleans? Probably most of you, right? So all of Orleans Parish is the city of New Orleans. We do a lot of rodent control as well. We do IPM, Integrated Pest Management, for city facilities, and also now we're working in schools. I just got a call about bats in the back. We've got several people that have different degrees, PhDs and master's levels. We have folks right out of high school, okay? So we have the full gamut of people with experience, and we usually float around 27 to 30 people. So we'll be at a high of 30. People retire, people come in, that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you that because we're not that big, okay? We're not that big. Our budget, a lot of government workers in here, we're about $2.1 million. We're pretty small compared to some of the surrounding districts, okay? So when you're small and you have a lot to do, you have to think smart and try to be innovative. But we do go out and procure a bunch of grants. We do product testing. We have a really robust termite program. So we're pretty creative in finding funding. We also do a lot of extension and education. So I'm going to go ahead and plug our Mosquito Academy that's coming up. We've got one this April, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of April. If you're interested at all, I'll have my email at the end. Very comprehensive 3-day program. All you wanted to know about mosquito control, mosquito biology, ID. Dr. McAllister is a speaker. We'll have Dr. Roxanne Connolly, also from University of Florida. So we'll actually cover chick pretty heavily this year. Again, we deal with a lot of pest control folks as well, okay? And so we're looking at operations, and some districts do not have a mosquito control program. So your pest control companies may be an ally here for you at that point. But we do lots of scientific meetings, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so what are we talking about today? So Janet gave a great intro on chick, on the mosquitoes, but I'm going to give you a bigger overview as well because it ties into the big picture. Of course, you've got Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus. What is integrated pest mosquito management? Okay, if you go in and you're spraying on a schedule because it's Thursday and that's the day to do it and I'm not doing resistance testing and I'm not checking anything, I don't think you're being that effective. Okay, and so there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of science. We had 3 travel cases last year in Orleans, and 1 person came back viremic. All right, so we kicked it into high gear on that one. And also I'm going to talk very briefly sort of the Cliff Note versions of our aerial cage test, because you have to validate. If I'm telling citizens or I'm on the TV or whatever it is saying, we're doing this to help manage these mosquitoes, I want to have some facts and data behind me, and I'm going to know that, yes, in fact, we are killing those mosquitoes, okay? So, and also I'm going to just briefly, 2 slides, talk about stormwater mitigation, because this is on the horizon. I don't know where you are in the state of Texas, but in Louisiana, New Orleans specifically, it is all about water, managing water. Cisterns are coming back. Okay? People forget. Yellow fever. Come on, right? No, let's bring them back. So anyway, so we're talking about that in rain gardens as well. All right, so first to all of you, so quick question. Who actually goes out in the field and does mosquito control? All right, so you've got a good number. Who sits in their office and tells them what to do? All right, so we got a good number of that too. All right, I'm pretty relaxed, as you can tell from my presentation style, but that helps me, get an idea. So for all the folks that sit in your office and tell them what to do, please go outside a little bit and find out what they really do, because it's tough work, okay? And it really helps you. I mean, I come from the field and I'm an administrator, but I go back in the field, but it's very important to go out there on a regular basis to have a better understanding of what's actually going on, okay? Very, very important. So let's start with the larval habitat. So, for us, for you, you've got floodwater, permanent water mosquitoes, and you've got container breeders, the container mosquitoes. Why am I even talking about this? Because I am telling you that people, resident A or government worker, city official bee will call me and say, I've got mosquitoes. What kind? You know, it makes a difference. It does make a difference. Are they coming from the salt marsh? Are they coming from someone's container? You know, the salt marsh, they may be traveling 30, 40 miles. Whereas your background or your backyard mosquitoes, they're localized. We need to try to figure out what's going on. Are they coming from the storm drain? What time of the day? So very important. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of our typical mosquito habitat that we have. I don't know what your tire situation here is, but for us, it is extremely bad. All right? And we have tires, and more tires throughout Orleans Parish that is truly unbelievable. They spontaneously reproduce. You take a pile out, you turn around, and there's more. You know, how is this possible? But it is. And so there's a big issue. We're working on that to try to help that situation. But tires and containers, you name it. People have junk in their yard. People are busy, you know. Ah! You know, this is terrible, but you know, this is normal in a lot of places. And so that's why I really recommend you going out there to the field and start understanding your geography that you're dealing with. Because you're going to see all of it, from terrible conditions to beautiful and pristine, spectacular homes. But just because they're spectacular doesn't mean that that grill cover, you know, doesn't have water on it, or whatever it is. I can find mosquito and rat breeding habitats everywhere. I don't care where you go, where I go. So anyway, so that's not unfortunately unusual, but just look at that. That's just amazing. Just to let you know too, we're not in the health department. I don't have enforcement power. I wish I did, but it's okay. You know, we work with our other city agencies, and you're going to see later in my presentation that you can't do this alone. You must cooperate and communicate, all right? This is too big of a job for any one group or person, especially if you're having an epidemic coming in. So with the container mosquitoes, you've got, of course, Culex, right, and Aedes. Those are going to be the majority of our container breeders. We have plenty of the southern house mosquito, and frankly, that is our biggest issue as far as from disease standpoint. Now, with chick coming in, and I will say it's coming in, that's a game changer, right? So for us, primarily, Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti, they're a nuisance. Okay, I know they're out there, but you know, they're not vectoring diseases. We're very conservative about when we spray, don't spray, using insecticides. Very conservative, trust me, in the big picture of it. So I am okay with saying this is a nuisance. I'm going to choose not to send that truck out today. Well, we're not putting that plane up because I'm watching the weather, and those salt marsh mosquitoes are going to die anyway, all right? So I'm okay with that. I get yelled at for not spraying, but who cares, okay? I'm making science-based decisions. It's okay. So, you know, these mosquitoes evolved in tree holes and little indentations in rocks, you know, all the natural little containers. And of course, we just happened to create plastic and glass and everything else and just made it awesome for them to live and find places to inhabit. So lots of species that are, in general are associated, but we're looking at the tires, the bird baths, the gutters, the pet dishes. This sounds so basic, right? But for all of you that go and inspect yards, you see this every single day. And education's tough. All right, I'm not going to talk too much about the biology, clearly, because Janet did such a great job, but we're blessed with both mosquitoes, the Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus. But, for example, cemeteries. Those are, a yellow fever mosquito tends to prefer those hotter places, whereas albopictus is going to prefer more the vegetated, heavily dense vegetative areas. They're going to prefer a little bit more sunlight. For example, the containers, look, little to big, they're going to go for it, whatever is out there. And so, of course, with dengue, and I'm glad Janet talked about it, you know, we're looking at dengue as well. And now we're starting to get more reports of imported cases of dengue because people are getting tested for chick. So active during the day, but as Janet said, you know, if you're out there on your porch, and we have a very exposed population, basically, people like to be outside. It's Louisiana, right? It's Friday night, it's Thursday night, it's Monday night, it's Tuesday. It's always a party, right, in New Orleans. And we have festivals, we have movie night, we have all these things. People love to be outside talking to their neighbor. I'm originally from Chicago, but with a Brazilian family, all right? So I'm already conditioned for living in New Orleans. But people are incredibly social, so you're anywhere walking by and someone will just start talking. Okay, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm being bit by mosquitoes. But, you know, it's anything. People are outside. But active during the day, let's say you're gardening. I love this. People will call in, and they're getting bit because they're gardening and, you know, it's all lush and beautiful and wet, you know, in their yard. Well, of course you're getting bit. All right. So efficient container breeding, they utilize what's out there, different sources. This is a little cup that we put with a little stick, and guess what? The eggs, those little black things are not little specks of dirt, but they're eggs, right? So we use that all the time, but the eggs are laid on the surface. It gets flooded or basically rains or whatever it is, and you're going to have immediate hatch of those. And as Janet explained it very well, you know, it's all asynchronous, and they're all coming off all the time. It's just kind of crazy. So in New Orleans, very dynamic, okay? There's been a historical presence, of course, with urbanization. Aedes albopictus introduced in the 1980s. And so we have both there. It was introduced in scrap tires, suburban and vegetative urban habitats primarily. But you know, things have been changing over New Orleans, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the distribution. But Aedes aegypti correlated more with the urbanization, that sort of, you know, less vegetation, a little bit hotter. Aedes albopictus more rural and suburban. They really like that vegetation as well. Not to say that you can't find both, okay? But the Aedes aegypti are more prone to desiccation. They're a little bit more resistant. They like that hotter environment. Low nutrient is out there, but again, as Janet said, you can find them when they get stressed out. You'll find them in any kind of water. Albopictus is a better competitor with the low nutrient water. All right, so I think there's kind of a misunderstanding out there that most people have screens on their doors, screens on the windows. They're just not exposed to mosquitoes. Well, when you start walking door to door to door, you find ripped screens, people who don't have screens on doors and windows. It just kind of depends where you are and what neighborhoods, but it's very important to make sure that you have an understanding of what's going on. So in 2004, there's been different groups. Dr. Dawn Wesson from Tulane University, she's been looking at the relationship and sort of the populations of Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti for years. So if you look at, 2004, the little red dots, that's where aegypti was found. And over the course of time, it has moved throughout the city. And in fact, in 2013, we have them spread throughout the entire city. All right, so we have locations with both mosquitoes. Very, very common to see it. So I'm setting it up here where you've got all of Orleans. Most of it have both the vectors. All right, so that's where we are. So all parts of the city now are a risk site. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about integrated mosquito management. And I am doing this because you have different levels of mosquito control programs out there. And some of it is, I can only afford this. I get it, okay? But when you can only do this, you still need to have the good science behind it, because then you may not be doing anything. You're going to have a false sense of security of what you're doing, and you're portraying it to the people you're supposed to be protecting. So very, very important for you to have a good understanding of what you're doing and why. So let's start with surveillance, okay? I don't care if you just have one spray truck and it's running through a particular area. If you're not doing surveillance, why are you spraying? You don't even know if you need to, all right? Let's use these tools effectively. So survey versus surveillance. The survey, you're going out there one time and you're doing an assessment, all right? Surveillance is going to be a continuing process to monitor changes in the mosquito population. And that's what these districts, many places do. And you can hopefully work with your state. Each state is a little different in what kind of resources and capacity and infrastructure they have for surveillance. It also depends on the individual district or contractor, what they're providing. But you need to ask these questions. But why do you do it? It's going to help you indicate when you actually need to provide control. All right? So it's important to know what species you have. What are those numbers? Are there males and females? Are they breeding? What's going on? And you're going to have to also monitor the effectiveness of what you're doing. There's lots of resistance out there in our insecticides. If it's larvicides or if it's adulticides, you may be spraying something or you may be putting something out in a larvicide, as a larvicide, and you don't even know if it's working. So it's important to go back and do some assessments to figure it out. And of course, when you do surveillance, you're also looking at pinpointing when these species are coming in. So it's now getting into spring for us. We've already started going into our parks. Do you guys know where City Park is? It's just a giant park in New Orleans. Lots of swales and lots of ruts, and they're doing renovations, but they don't listen to what we're asking. It's a complicated deal, but they have lots of swales full of Aedes vexans, all right? Not so worried about the disease issue, but I'm really worried about the nuisance part of it because they're aggressive little guys and girls, and they're going after folks. But it's like a timeline. We know it's coming. We are also in the marsh looking around. We're talking to the different mosquito control districts to see what's going on. We'll be putting out our light traps out, I believe, April 1st, if the weather can just hold cold, okay? So we want it to stay cold. So that's great. So anyway, so very important to understand what's going on with your peaks of with mosquito species. All right. So you're saying, look, I can't even go looking for mosquitoes. I don't have those resources. Well, look, really, you don't need a whole lot. Okay, you need some traps, you need some expertise and ID, that or this or that. But basically, if someone's out in the truck, this is what they need. A dipper. You're looking for some pipettes and aspirators, some different things that you can carry with you. Most important thing, as my 4-year-old says, I'm looking at you, right? So your eyes, that's the most important thing. So very important to be vigilant and look for the larvae, adults, et cetera, et cetera. You can go out there and do landing rates depending on what you're looking at and what species, right? So of course, if you're in a disease situation, please don't send your folks out doing landing rates, maybe unless you don't really like them or something, right? So, there's some issues there. Don't expose your staff to the disease. But anyway, it's cheap and fast, and I'll tell you right after Katrina, this is all we had. We lost everything. So you get out there and you're doing landing rates. Sometimes you're out in the marsh and you take a 5-minute count or 5-second count and you extrapolate and get the heck out of there because there are so many, right? So it just kind of depends. Jana talked a little bit about the traps that are out there. There's a whole variety of different traps. Now, it's very important that you understand how each one works and what they catch. All right? We are not using gravitraps to look for Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti. You're going to miss the boat. But I just talked to somebody not too long ago, and they were actually interested in West Nile, and they had 0 gravitraps out. 0. So they had to modify some of what they were doing because they were missing the boat, okay? Very important for you to understand. So Jana talked about the BG Sentinels. Here's the little cups. Those are the ones that we're using for the Aedes out there. Plus, we're going out there and vacuuming them up with a backpack and sucking them up by the vegetation. They're tough. All right, so what are some of the resources that are available out there to you? Because you're going to have levels of 1 spray truck. You may be in Lee County, Florida, where you have all the resources you would ever need, it seems like, right? Even in around some of my districts where the budgets are 2.5 times what ours is, and they just do mosquito control. So it's kind of a different world. But look at your local resources that are out there. Look at your state. What do they provide? Surveillance data, very important. Identification. You have to learn how to ID these mosquitoes, and not everybody does. And so go find somebody who can help you or teach you. There are lots of different resources out there, from even short courses. The Dodd short courses in Florida are really great. Lots of books out there. You can teach yourself. Coordination of management areas. So I know you've got one county with cities and everybody may be doing something a little differently. You're going to have to see each other and talk to each other. All right? Because that, let's say the floodwater mosquito that's on one side of the county is probably going to move to the other side of the county. You know, that helps be more efficient. It helps share resources. You know, you're not all doing the same thing. You may be able to, you know, coordinate efforts. That's going to help a lot. Universities, USDA, Centers for Disease Control. I've got Janet's phone number on speed dial, okay? And not only her, but if we're working with rodents or doing other things, it's great. Now, it's just wonderful to know that. All right, so clearly this isn't going to be an Aedes albopictus, Aedes aegypti situation, floodwater here, but you have to be able to do these things, go out there, do some surveys. This is, again, you know, maybe more for quinks, but you're going to have to understand what your common mosquito habitats are in your particular area. This is a living nightmare for us, and I'm telling you, it is crazy. So, you know, we're still recovering in a lot of ways from Hurricane Katrina. New Orleans has made such an unbelievable comeback. For those that have been there before Hurricane Katrina and then after and in the years since, so many wonderful things are happening in the city of New Orleans. But, you know, we still have so many blighted properties. We are the second most blighted city in the country. We were number one. Detroit is number one now. We've moved down. And the administration is really putting a lot of effort into removing that and finding different options and alternatives for lots and abandoned houses. And it's just a lot. But the tires seem, like I said, seem to reproduce. I'm traumatized by tires, so I'll probably talk about it the whole presentation, right? But even yesterday, there was a meeting with sanitation and Louisiana DEQ, and we need to find some better ways of enforcement and better use of these tires. All right, we talked about that a little bit, but you know, the container breeders, that's what we're really interested in with the old tires and everything else. We saw that already. Not such an issue for Aedes albopictus, Aedes aegypti here with the abandoned pools, but you may have some fountains or ponds or whatever it is, and you know, fish are a great option. We used fish extensively after Hurricane Katrina, still now, and it's worked beautifully. We had over 97% success when we put fish out there. So I'm just telling you this so that you know that this is a great option for your program. Just make sure that whatever fish you introduce, we use Gambusa affinis, that is something that is acceptable that you can put out in your environment. So go to the local pet store or whatever and buy something. All right, so part of integrated mosquito management is source reduction, right? So let's get back to the basics here. You're not going to be normally doing the heavy equipment, but in this case, why did we have to keep treating this swale when all we needed to do was pull a plug? And that's what we did, right? Pull the plug, source reduction, water's gone. Keep it wet or keep it dry. Wet, dry doesn't work so well. But French drains, hey, you might see some Aedes in there. French drains, people install them improperly, wrong angle. The other thing is like those corrugated tubes that come off the gutter pipes. Nightmare, okay? Just to check those out. So, because that's a place where you would get a lot of breeding for Aedes. Chemical control, you know, that is going to be part of a program. So you're going to stop them at their source when you can with larvicides. You're going to use adulticides when appropriate. Sometimes we even do barrier treatments at a house underneath a porch or something if it's needed. I am not advocating going out and spraying all your vegetation and, you know, thinking you're doing a great job. We're also trying to educate a lot of the smaller pest control companies or companies that are out there that do yard treatments so that you don't go out with a general insecticide and just basically nuke the yard every 30 days, right? And so I'm pretty excited about our academy because last year we had about 80% of the folks that attended were small businesses. So we're reaching out to them to teach them how to do mosquito control. So very exciting. And of course, you know, you want to always advocate personal protection, especially if you're in New Orleans, all right? But make sure that people are wearing their repellents. But as Janet said, don't rely on that only. You know, it's hot. People don't want to wear long sleeves or, But they should visit the Centers for Disease Control website. That's what we do. All right, what about larvicides? Great option here. Lots of different products that are on the market. I'm not going to go through each one here, but I did throw in our little copepod, fish, and turtles. Right? So we've had an extensive program using copepods through the years, and they work very well with Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus. And we're actually, it kind of, maybe about 15-ish years ago, it was really ramped up, and it's slowed down. We don't use it very often, but we just had a conversation the other day. We maintain all of our colonies, and we're thinking about putting them out again on scrap tires because they do very well. They handle desiccation very well, but they do much better on Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti than they would on quinks, okay? And we do see quinks in our tires. But again, what are your options out there? Utilize all of it. So lots of different formulations of larvicides, different ways of putting it out, different equipment. We don't have a helicopter. I wish we did. It would be super cool, but they're very expensive to maintain and to use. That's never going to be in our budget. But you have different formulations. We do have an airboat. We don't actually larvicide much of the marsh or anything. We haven't done that since I've been there. And so we do more monitoring, if anything. And again, lots of different granular liquids, oils, you name it, it's out there. All right, adulticides. So sometimes this gets to be a touchy subject, right? But look, adulticides are part of a program, and they need to be used effectively. So here happens to be our airplane. We've got a Britten Norman Islander. We've had it for years. But you also have units on vehicles, just trucks, or on John Deere Gators, or on four-wheelers. It just little hand units. It just depends what your district needs and what is most effective for you. In some cases, we do need to treat a yard, and they do have handheld units that you can use as well for ULV. But then we also have large droplet mist blowers if needed and if it's the right choice to use. I just put this picture in here about the misting systems because I know in Texas you see a lot more of those. We don't have a ton of them, but people tend to put them in. We are not fans of that system because it's not integrated pest management. It's spraying on a schedule, right? It's that you're giving that homeowner the ability to press that button if they see that spider or that little stink bug that's just going about, or that, they're probably not going to do it for a ladybug. But, pick something. They're probably just going to say, I don't like bugs, so I'm going to go ahead and press that button anyway. We need to, again, go back to the IPM where you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So we don't like it. The other thing we don't want to do is to put pressure, insecticide pressure on our mosquitoes. We have enough of it with all the pyrethroids that are out there, over-the-counter garden usage, and who knows what. But here's sort of the concept. We've got Mew here and Cynthia from our lab. And one of the things we do is that we do bottle bioassays regularly. We're checking our mosquito populations for the panel of insecticides that are out there. We've been killing the mosquitoes. We had to change from resmethrin years ago because it wasn't killing our quinks. Okay, we moved to malathion. And now we're looking for some alternatives to mix it up a little bit. So you have to have an understanding because, again, going back, you don't want to give your homeowners a false insecurity. Here comes a spray truck and life is awesome, all right? Maybe here comes that spray truck and you have tremendous resistance. You're not killing anything. What's going on? So you have to understand what's going on. But what we want to avoid is having a populations of mosquitoes out there. You kill a bunch of them, but a few remain that are tolerant. And there's just different ways to measure that. And all of a sudden now your whole population starts to acquire the resistance and the tolerance. So we want to avoid that. And of course, really briefly here, we still want to talk about repellents, hunters that go out in the field or wherever it is. You're going to be outside. There's different clothing with textiles, chemical treated, all kinds of stuff. So, that's part of it. It's not the whole story, but that's part of it. So biological control agents, look, these are totally can be your ally. And this will work with Aedes as well. If you've got those ponds and those pools and those permanent water sites, these are wonderful. You put 30 to 50 in them, boy, they eat everything, they reproduce all day long. Okay, and next thing you know, you don't have a problem. So to me, you're not putting out the insecticides, and plus I don't have the manpower to send somebody out there 5 times a year to look at a particular container. So we work with the homeowners, we work with different groups to get them out there. Again, copepods and turtles as well. Turtles do great, they eat lots of mosquitoes, but we really just save them for those highly organic, nasty water, but you know, every once in a while. All right, public education. So again, this is important. When I talk about public education, it's not just your residents that are out there. It is the industry, okay, that you deal with. It is also members of your government. It's very, very important that I educate my bosses, our mayor, our city council on what is good mosquito control, what is a comprehensive program. So I don't get a whole lot of pressure saying, Claudia, I want you to spray right now, okay? All right then, let me check the data and let's see what we're gonna do. You know, that's usually my answer. And I explain over and over and over. Well, you know what? Let's go look at that house. Your constituents crying, they're complaining. Let's go look and see if there's really going on or if there's a neighborhood issue. Or, look, the weather's bad, so we're really not going to get out there. Or, you know what? I agree. It's already scheduled because we looked at our data and that's the right thing to do. All right? So you have to be prepared to say, here's the data. This is what I think from a professional standpoint. I'm going to spray or I'm not. All right? And so you have to lay down the law. And I mean, that's what we've done for the last 50 years in our program, and we turned 50 last year. And we have gone in with that mentality of we run a data-based program, period. Okay? And it's stuck. And a lot of it is on my part and previous directors' part of continuously educating the decision makers of what is a good mosquito control program. And it's not just mosquitoes. I deal with rats and coyotes now and all kinds of stuff. And so it's that constant education and re-education because, as you well, I'm not appointed. I'm civil service. In my particular case, I'm only 4 directors in the entire city. But so there's continuity. But everybody else seems to change, right, every few years. And so it's that constant re-education of people. But it's fun. It's very important. All right. And as far as also dealing with the homeowners, we try to keep it at a 3rd grade-ish level for most of our educational materials. I love to go to different websites like, especially Centers for Disease Control. They love that you grab their information and stick our logo on it. I know it's been vetted. I know it's accurate. Of course, you have to deal with your communications departments, if it's at the state level, a city level. Don't forget to educate them too, because sometimes, just from an education standpoint, oftentimes things will start moving into hysteria when they shouldn't, right? Stay calm, hold the line, your message, okay? Be that professional. And in the end, that does make a difference, I believe, in how all of it's handled. Structures, of course, very important. We still talk about it, you know, fixing people's screens, very important. Doors, interior, close that door. It's important. People are hot. Not everybody has air conditioning. You know, they've got the windows open. Really important. Okay, now let's get to the meat and potatoes, right? I'm not going to talk about this here just because Janet did a great job here. But in 2003, you know, when we started seeing, well, really December, when we made it over to our hemisphere, our staff looked at it and said, oh my goodness, okay, what's the plan? So you need to think about these things way in advance, not during. It's difficult because all the other things that I talked about, communication and response and dealing with homeowners, all that is enough to make anyone crazy. All right? So what's your plan? Who'd you talk to? You know, where's your contingency contracts? All these things are very important. And I mean, we're talking about a disease epidemic, but what about a disaster coming in? You need to have your things in order because those are not predictable. So anyway, so that's that. So preparations, all right? So what's your response plan? Even if you sketch it out in your head, you know, and then just jot it down, that's a starting point. and look what's out there. I think it's Vero Beach, University of Florida. Those folks have that's a great website, by the way. And there's a lot of good information there, and that's a great start. What's going on with the surveillance program? And this is some of the things that we did. So I think our program is pretty robust for surveillance. We are increasing Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti because it's needed. But virus testing, does anybody in your state do it? They do in our state now for chick. But you can, farm it out to a lab if needed. And you're going to have to understand your local tolerance, resistance to insecticides. It's just, you're going to need to know. If you can't do it in-house, work with some other group that can help you with that. And then, of course, how are you going to handle your data? And I will tell you the data part of it is very important, especially if you're dealing with FEMA. If your data's not organized, because they're going to ask for records 3 years back. If you don't have them, you may not be eligible for funding and reimbursement for above and beyond, what you normally do. So very important. You also need to think about infrastructure, larviciding, adulticiding. We've been thinking about this. We're ramping up. Frankly, I'm being honest here, we're ramping up our larviciding capacity. All right, to really focus in on those Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti. We've got lots of parts of New Orleans where you've got walls going up, heavily vegetated. How are we going to get back into those yards? I don't have enough staff to go to door, right? So I need to start thinking, what about all the cemeteries that are out there, and the mausoleums, and the little water-containing holders, the little, where you put the flowers. So those are the kinds of things that we need to do, because in, recent past, that mosquito was more of a nuisance that I can live with, but now it's a game changer. Supplies, insecticides. Is it validated in the field? Have you trained your personnel? Have you educated your own staff? Contingency contracts. I mean, we actually have a standing contingency contract with other mosquito control districts. If our equipment comes down or goes down, I can call one of them and they'll come help us. And it also is a very important document for FEMA reasons. It's a standing contract. The equipment rates are in there. If there's something that happens, FEMA is going to honor those rates. Because if you start looking in their blue book value, it's a lot less. I mean, who's gone through a disaster and have done FEMA work? You have, right? So have your stuff in order, because you're gonna need the extra money, I'm telling you. Interagency cooperation. So we're really small, and I'm gonna show you a picture. I'm in Homeland Security, so I talk to firefighters and police all the time. And we have recruited the firefighters to help us out, go door to door. They have a smoke detector campaign. I've got a mosquito and rat campaign. Let's work together. So that now has increased our capacity tremendously. But you got to talk to these folks now, because during an epidemic or during a disaster, it's much more difficult. All right. Education, we talked about that. That is me day in, day out, day in. My staff's like, you talk too much, but that's my job. I'm all about vector control. I love it. I breathe it, and I want them to understand that it is important too. Janet made a very important comment here, is that programs are going down and down and they're disappearing. And I do my job locally to say this is important for tourism, it's important for public health, it's important for a whole lot of reasons, and that's why you should think it's important too. And I think we've done, frankly, a great job of that. And I have a super awesome example of it where it was Hurricane Isaac. And I sit around the table every day. We have to give briefings to the mayor. And it was near the end of one of the last meetings we were having. And the mayor looks at me and is like, Claudia, I know you're not spraying because of some scientific reason, right? Yes, you got it! I wanted to get up and hug him, but that would have been completely unprofessional at that moment. But, do you know how important that is? That's huge! I don't see the enthusiasm from you guys. But that is amazing, because it's not him saying, go spray. And so, yes, sir, this is the reason. We'll be out there. We were serving, the marsh, what's going on. You'll see us in a few days. So very, very important for him to have the faith in our group to say, I know you're doing it, and you're doing it right, but just can you explain to me what's going on? So very, very important. Okay. Airport officials and port officials. Have you reached out to your airport? All right, we did. We worked with the state, DHH, Office of Public Health, and we actually had notifications at the airport with chikungunya, looking at where people are coming from and where they're going. We're also a big port city. We're now having 4 cruise ships, okay, coming from New Orleans. Tons of people come. They actually stay for a couple days and then cruise, or they cruise and then they stay for a couple days. All right, so if someone comes back viremic, then we have that to worry about. Great document here, responding to mosquito-borne epidemic emergency. Look, it's out there. They have guidelines. You're also going to have to work with different organizations. If you're working in a bubble, you're going to lose out. It's just not going to work. You're going to have to work with your public works, if it's, safety, whoever it is, Homeland Security. I want you to make, and they recommend making evidence-based decisions, not just because. It costs money, okay? I mean, that's part of it as well. It's expensive to do operations, but you want to use data, data, data. So make sure that you're collecting the appropriate data. And, you want to deal where the risk is the highest for mosquito-borne incidents, perhaps. For us, super example, 2012, we had West Nile. Our mosquitoes were just bubbling with West Nile virus. And I also had mosquitoes from the marsh coming. So I've got people, but you know what? We get more calls from the nuisance mosquitoes than we do from the from quinks, honestly. And so I've got this whole group of people who choose to live out by the water. They're screaming and crying. I'm like, I'm sorry, put the repellent on because we're going to deal with disease issues. And this is what's going on. They didn't like the answer, but that's what's going to happen. But anyway. If you have the ability to eliminate larval habitats when you can, and if you have the tools of GIS, most state and cities now have a GIS department or at least have somebody that can help you out with that. It's great to start plotting all your data. Just super quick example here, I guess. I'm going to give you an example of putting that policy into action. Though it's with West Nile, we did this last year, very similar situation with chikungunya. So, of course, you have all of your surveillance. In 2012, we started seeing activity in our mosquitoes in April, all right? So something's wrong there. Things are a little different. That's a little early for us. But anyway, what I'm trying to say here is we worked with our sanitation department to pick up tires. We pull them, they picked them up, all right? We also work with Sewage and Water Board to get an idea of leaks. Do you know that 40 to 60% of the potable water in New Orleans leaks out? Okay? We have tremendous amounts of leaks throughout the city of New Orleans. It's amazing. There just isn't enough money. It's like I don't know how many billions of dollars to fix it. So pretty amazing, but it's not uncommon to see that. All right. Also, door hangers. I mean, we do rodent work, so why not, kill 2 birds with 1 stone? So on the front page, on the front side, and this is very inexpensive to do, by the way. I mean, we had thousands and thousands printed for just like $1,000. It was pretty cheap. We went door to door, and we recruited the firefighters. We brought in Louisiana, some of the epidemiologists, went door to door, brought in the media, just try to get that campaign out. And also, firefighters had their issues, and we already talked about that, so they're a great ally for us. There are a whole lot of them. And, of course, we've got pretty rough areas as well, as most cities do. You're going to have to work with your police. You can't just say, I'm not going in there, all right? You have to. Everyone's entitled to the same service. And so we have worked with our police department. They would basically drive in a truck, produce a lot of visibility, and we'd go door to door. So very important. Larviciding, look, we did all of that, from storm drains to containers to whatever it may be. And of course, we also implemented the use of our truck and our airplane when needed in appropriate methods. So keep going here. I'm just showing this picture because with the surveillance, you start to see what happens over the course of the year, summer or whatever, your season. And you can really start picturing each one of these little grids as a zone. And you start to get a better idea of what's going on. Here's in August, but anyway, it was a difficult year. But this is what it broke out to be in 2012. We had 18 West Nile cases, human. That's not a whole lot, all right? So I think we did pretty well. And 11 neuroinvasive, 6 fevers, and a blood donor. So it was emergency on the whole season till October. And the crazy part of it was that near the end of the summer, we actually analyzed our mosquito populations before and after spraying, and we were able to get significant differences, which is great, pushing the numbers of mosquitoes down. But many of those mosquitoes were still infected with West Nile. So, I mean, we were still going, all right, because that risk potential was still out there. All right, so chikungunya here. So I talked about it in 2013. You know, we saw it in Martinique and said, okay, what's the plan? Because this is not good. All right, and so we moved through. And as Janet talked about it, we had 43 cases already this year in the States. And then to make it even more awesome, CDC comes out in July of last year estimating, you know, that New Orleans has about a 78% chance of getting locally acquired chikungunya, right? We've got all the wonderful factors that make it a wonderful and possible place for us to get chikungunya locally acquired. So, you know, that's a pretty strong statement right there, and we clearly took it seriously. So we ramped up egg collections using overtraps. You know, again, you can't do everything everywhere. So what are your highest risk areas? The port, where people are coming in, you know, where we had historical data to support it. Brought mosquitoes in, we rear them, we ID them. You know, there's a whole lab component that goes behind it. And you continue to evaluate the distribution. What is going on with these both species and where are they located? All right, so anyway, just to continue on, the BG sentinel traps have worked pretty well for us. These are difficult to collect, so it's not just trapping, it's going out, it's searching, it's vacuuming, it's, you know, over traps, it's everything to try to get these mosquitoes. And we also started collecting and pooling those mosquitoes for testing for chick, looking for virus. So our state Department of Public Health, they did a great job. They really stepped up, I believe, in helping create a response, but providing the infrastructure. LSU came in, their diagnostics lab, and began accepting samples for testing for chick. And I know it's a needle in the haystack, all right? We don't have any human cases, but I don't want to wait till human cases to find out where the virus is. We actually want to go in these more, well, you'll see it in our travel case if the person was viremic. I mean, that's a great location to actually search. So anyway, we talked about all these different things already, so let's get right back into where our imported cases were. 3 in New Orleans, as I mentioned. The first one, the onset, was in 6-4. This person, we get the information from the state in a timely fashion. These were all very timely, which is great. We don't know where they live. There's HIPAA laws that go with it. We have a 100-block information of where they are, and so that way we can respond appropriately to that. But we don't know who they are. We do know that that person was not feeling well coming back. We don't know from where. I know from the Caribbean somewhere. But they came back feeling bad, and they were virus positive. So did that person, I have no information on this, did that person go in and sit on their porch? But if they were sick, hopefully they just went inside and laid on their couch with the air conditioning on and did not have any mosquitoes around, right? So we've got the vectors, the person was there with the virus. But anyway, that was the highest risk that we had. And then to top it off, it couldn't have been like a more ideal part of town in an area where you could have mosquitoes going in and out of the house. We don't know their situation, but that was the case. The other two, we were notified later. They were a lower risk, okay? They weren't symptomatic anymore. They didn't have virus. So what we did with that first case is, as soon as we found out what 100 block, we started going into that neighborhood and started collecting. Of course, we implemented adulticide control pretty aggressively, actually, especially knowing that that person was viremic. But we also did pre and post collections of the mosquitoes. That I was actually around here, some of the trapping area, the other 2 areas where the travelers came back. We talked about that already, but this is what was disturbing in that neighborhood, is that it was a neighborhood that was really undergoing a lot of gentrification. So you had houses that were very poor condition. You had abandoned houses, actually, and then you had houses that had been totally renovated with everybody in between from socioeconomic status. And so many of these houses, they didn't even have air conditioning anymore, or didn't have it. I mean, they had a box fan and no screens, sucking in the mosquitoes. That's what we're thinking, right? So it was a lot of going door to door, educating. Actually, it was on Father's Day is when we went in door to door. It was a Sunday, hoping that more people would be outside and we could try to get to them. You know, there's this big myth out there that everyone's got AC, we're not exposed to mosquitoes. This is just not the case. I want to make sure that I emphasize that point. And then the other part of it is maybe they do have AC, but they might be out there gardening or working in their yard. I mean, people love to be outside. I mean, I love to be outside, right? So it's very important, not always the case. And plus, you'll see a lot of houses that we did in that neighborhood in other parts where ripped screens, people just can't afford anything else, okay? So they do what they can do. All right, the other thing we did in that particular house, in that area to respond was get the tires out of there. This is just the ideal breeding site. We had one house, 65 tires that we pulled out of one house. You know, that was on Father's Day. But, and then you can see here, we actually larvicided as well because the sanitation department was coming in behind us a day or two later to come pick up. But, you know, you do everything you have to do. Here's our staff loading up tires. You do what you got to do. And there are certain laws and our LADEQ, you can't pick up more than 20 tires without a permit and all that, but, you know, all right, you're recording, so I'll just stick with that line. So, but anyway, do what you got to do, all right, sometimes. Work with your health departments, work with your appropriate authorities to get the letters, whatever it is you need to. The other thing is we targeted, we do not normally really, since I've been there, spray in the day, okay? I'm worried about honeybees and some other issues, so we don't do that. Typically, we're spraying in the middle of the night anyway for quinks. Now, our peak sort of host-seeking activity is between 10 and midnight, so that's kind of late at night. But we really did go pretty aggressive in those particular areas to push down the number of those 80s that were there. We continue to partner. This gentleman right here is a city councilman. All right? It's really important to educate your decision makers on the importance of all of this. So tires are a big issue for him, and then we were able to, you know, take them for several hours and do a really great educational program. And also, he had a better understanding of what we do and how we do it. You know, be professional. It's very important. Also, look what's out there. CDC put some, chikungunya educational materials. These ended up at the airport, on websites. We push them out to physicians. You can't forget about your medical workers. Very, very important. So planning ahead here, look, different districts need to take into account their risks. St. Tammany also has a gyp type, but most of these districts have albopictus anyway. You're going to have to take it with a multi-agency approach. Very, very important. See what people are doing. Centers for Disease Control, networking, and you can clearly see that Dr. McAllister and her team up there, tremendous amount of knowledge and support that comes from them. You have to educate the physicians. They're first line. Most states, you're going to first know about chikungunya because somebody's sick, all right? And so I can tell you just from talking with a lot of physicians, chicka what? Chicken gumbo, chicken this, chicka, no one knows how to say it, all right? So I think we're gotten better about chikungunya, but I think a large group still, put it to your physician. Do a test. You go to the doctor, go to the pediatrician, say, hey, do you know anything about this virus, chikungunya? Chicka what? So that's what they're going to say. So then you've got your opportunity to do that. But actually, our state pushed out information to our physicians early on last year. I'm wrapping it up, Patrick. Ports of entry. You need to do your homework, guys. Where are people coming in? All right, your Texas, people are coming right up. And they're cutting across, shooting over to the state. We have a lot of construction, a lot of agriculture, a lot of different things. So understand how people are moving in your state. Very important. Signs at the airport. If you're at a high risk, where are these airplanes coming in? Work with your airport or whoever is administrating that if they'll let you do it. Chicken gumbo testing at LSU, so that was a big deal for us. And internal planning and education, sort of to wrap that up. Look, prepare your press releases now when it's nice and calm. You're gonna have an ice storm tonight. Perfect time to do it, right? Probably not gonna be at work tomorrow. Say, I'm gonna do a chikungunya brochure. So have those out. You can, of course, modify them during your time that you need them, but at least the heavy lifting is done. Equipment, increased capacity. We happen to be actually preparing a publication, a literature review, and then also think about an arboviral working group. So state of Louisiana has that. It's just a bunch of different folks in the state, and we meet and talk regularly on that. So just really, really brief, I think. What happened here? Look, the infection rate's pretty low, right? We know that. Only one person came back by remic. Not unexpected. We did not find any chick in our mosquitoes. Not unexpected either, but I feel it's the responsible thing to start looking, especially in areas that have the potential. And again, you should take this pretty seriously. I know we did. And also, we're going to really look at what else is out there. What do we need to tweak? What are we doing? And you have to evaluate your control strategies. We don't have time today. I was hoping to get to it, but we've done an aerial test, and we're going to be doing a whole bunch more this summer, looking at cage tests of Aedes albopictus, quinks, all that, in sequestered areas, out in the open. We have a lot of raised homes. And one of the two trials, we were able to get like 90-something% kill in our sequestered areas. So anytime you do any kind of field test, if it's by truck or by plane, you have to do it a bunch of times because weather conditions, the wind, your plane goes out or your truck goes out and everything's awesome and all of a sudden the wind drops, or it just picks up like crazy and you have to scrap it, right? Or there's an obstruction out there, a new tower that you didn't know about. So you have to repeat these things numerous times, but it's very encouraging that in a sequestered area, we're getting 90-something% kill. So in our tests. They're pretty exciting. Okay. I think that's all we have time for. Am I done? Yeah. I'm sorry. If you want to hear more, okay, let me give you. I'm telling you, I'm getting out of here. Sorry. Love you guys. But I'm out. So I've been checking my flight. American Airlines, 975. Still going. Here's the mosquito control at NOLA.gov. Take that. We do tons of training, lots of fun stuff. We're actually bringing one of your people over from Brett Johnson. I don't know if you guys know him. Coyote guy. He's coming to our office to do a workshop on the 18th of March. But we have people that come from all over the country to a lot of these trainings. The other thing is American Mosquito Control Association's in New Orleans. Okay? And the field day is at our office. And I said yes to that, which is why I don't know. But we have about 450, 500 people coming to our office. It's going to be a lot of fun. Who's going to AMCA? Anybody? All right, come to our office. We're having gumbo and jambalaya and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, thank you so much.